What if Jon Snow's greatest failure was actually his ultimate victory? We all thought his exile beyond the wall was a heartbreaking punishment for a fallen king, but House of the Dragon's Aegon's dream changes everything. Jon didn't just walk away, he fulfilled a 1,000-year-old ancestral prophecy that the Iron Throne was never meant to solve. And here is the part that will change how you see the entire story. The show ended with Jon Snow, the man who was secretly Aegon Targaryen, the true heir to the Iron Throne. No crown, no title, no throne, just snow, trees, and the free folk heading deeper into the north. For a lot of people, that felt like a slap in the face, like the writers gave the most important character in the show the worst possible ending. But what if they were wrong? What if we were all wrong? Because once you look at what House of the Dragon quietly dropped in its very first episode, Jon's ending does not look like a punishment anymore. It looks like the finish line. Let's start from the very beginning, because this goes back further than Jon Snow. Way further. About 200 years before Game of Thrones even begins, Aegon the Conqueror, the man who built the Iron Throne out of the swords of his enemies and united 6 of the 7 kingdoms under one ruler, had a dream. Not a regular dream, a vision. He saw the end of the world. He saw a long night, a darkness and cold so overwhelming that it would wipe out every living man, woman, and child on the continent. And in this vision, the only way to stop it was for a Targaryen king or queen to sit on the Iron Throne and keep Westeros unified. That unity was the only thing that could give the living a fighting chance against what was coming from the north. This was not common knowledge. Aegon did not announce this to the world. He kept it a secret and passed it down through generations of Targaryen rulers. In House of the Dragon, we see King Viserys I tell his daughter Rhaenyra this exact secret, and you can see from her reaction that it reframes everything. The Iron Throne was never about power. It was never about wealth or glory or legacy. It was always about survival. The entire Targaryen conquest, the wars, the dragons, the centuries of rule, all of it was designed with one purpose: keep Westeros together so it does not fall apart when the real enemy comes knocking. House of the Dragon Episode 4 also revealed that Aegon's dream was secretly inscribed on the Targaryens' Valyrian steel dagger, which reads, "From my blood come the prince that was promised, and his will be the song of ice and fire." This confirms that Aegon's vision is the same as the prince that was promised prophecy that Melisandre preached throughout Game of Thrones. That dagger, the cat's paw dagger, the one that ends up being used to kill the Night King. Think about that. The weapon connected to the prophecy from the very beginning is the one that ends the threat in the end. George R.R. Martin does not do accidents. Now think about Rhaegar Targaryen, Jon's father. Rhaegar was obsessed with this prophecy. In the books, he was a scholar and a reader, and it was his deep study of these ancient texts that convinced him that the prince that was promised was coming, and that he might be the one to father that child. His first son with Elia Martell was named Aegon, a deliberate callback to the original Conqueror. Then Rhaegar met Lyanna Stark. He believed their child, a child of ice and fire, a Stark and a Targaryen, was the one the prophecy spoke about. House of the Dragon confirmed that Rhaegar naming his second son Aegon was extremely purposeful. If he was trying to fulfill Aegon's dream, it fits that he would name his sons after the original Conqueror, doubling down on the idea that Jon was the chosen one. So before Jon Snow was even born, his father was already pointing at him and saying, this is the one. In the season 7 finale of Game of Thrones, we finally heard Lyanna tell her brother Ned that Jon Snow's true name is Aegon Targaryen, the trueborn son of Rhaegar Targaryen. She made Ned promise to protect him, not to put him on a throne, not to tell the world who he really was, just to protect him. Because if Robert Baratheon found out a Targaryen heir existed, he would have had the baby killed without a second thought. So Jon grew up as a bastard, a boy with no real name and no real place, not quite a Stark and not quite anything else. He watched his brothers and sisters grow up with their identities intact while he sat at the far end of the table, always slightly outside of everything. And yet Jon Snow, the supposed bastard with nothing, is the one who ends up at the centre of the most important war in human history. Now here is what most people miss about the middle of this story. Jon Snow becomes Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, which is already a big deal, but what he does in that role is even bigger. He makes a decision that every single person around him thinks is insane. He opens the gates and lets the wildlings through the wall. He goes to Hardhome and watches thousands of free folk get slaughtered by the dead and brings back who he can. He does this because he understands something nobody south of the wall wants to admit. The living need to be unified. All of them, not just the lords and their armies and their dragons. Everyone. This is the exact thing Aegon's dream said a Targaryen leader had to do. It was Jon's actions that most directly united the people to fight against the White Walkers. Daenerys played her part too, but none of it would have happened without Jon Snow. He became king in the north. He bent the knee to Daenerys to get her dragons and her armies into the fight. He stood at Winterfell when the Night King came, and while it was Arya who actually drove the knife into the Night King, the battle only happened because Jon spent years pulling people together. The wildlings trusted him. The northern lords followed him. Daenerys brought her forces because of him. Considering this is exactly what Aegon I had seen in his dream, Jon's story proved him to be the prince that was promised, the prophesied Targaryen who would unite Westeros to defeat the White Walkers. The prophecy was not about who landed the killing blow, it was about who built the coalition that made the killing blow possible, and that was Jon Snow. So why did he not get to sit on the throne? And why does that actually make sense? Here is the thing about the Iron Throne that Game of Thrones spent 8 seasons showing us. It destroys people. The Mad King went insane sitting on it. Robert Baratheon became a drunk who let his kingdom rot. Cersei murdered, lied, and burned everything around her trying to keep it. Even Daenerys, who spent her whole life believing she was born for it, turned into exactly what she swore to destroy, the moment she sat close enough to touch it. There is a clear through line from the Civil War that tore the Targaryen family apart to Daenerys believing herself the last Targaryen alive, and how the Iron Throne and power corrupted and corroded the once all-powerful house. House of the Dragon makes this painfully clear. Every Targaryen succession leads to blood. Every argument over who deserves the throne costs lives, burns cities, and distracts the family from the actual reason they were supposed to be in Westeros in the first place. The Dance of the Dragons, the civil war at the centre of House of the Dragon, kills dragons on both sides, and leaves the Targaryen dynasty weakened for generations. All of it over a chair made of swords. Now think about what Jon Snow does in the finale. He kills Daenerys, not because he wanted power, not because he wanted the throne for himself, because she had just burned thousands of innocent people alive and he knew she would do it again. He made the hardest possible choice. He chose the living over the person he loved. And what did that get him? A dungeon cell, a trial he barely survived, an exile beyond the wall. The lords of Westeros sent him away because the political cost of letting a Targaryen walk free in the Seven Kingdoms was too complicated. They could not execute him because the Unsullied would have destroyed the city. They could not let him stay because he was too dangerous a symbol. So they sent him to the only place where politics do not matter, where no one cares about bloodlines or succession or the Iron Throne. And here is the part that completely changes the reading of that scene. Jon Snow walked through that gate, and he did not look back with regret. He looked back once, and then turned north. And then he walked into the trees with the free folk. This banishment was supposed to be a punishment, but it is really his version of a happy ending. He is free of the pressure of not wanting to rule. And it is fitting that he is back with the people Ygritte came from, since she was always his truest love. The Night's Watch brothers, who escorted him to the wall and then closed the gate behind him, understood something important. They knew he did not deserve a fate of living at the wall, defending Westeros against nobody. His brothers were thanking him for everything he had done for them in the Seven Kingdoms, by freeing him of any responsibilities to it. Now let's talk about what that last scene actually means when you layer Aegon's dream on top of it. Aegon's prophecy said that the threat comes from the north. The Long Night originates beyond the wall, in the lands of always winter, where the White Walkers were created by the children of the forest and eventually turned against everyone. The true boundary of civilization in this world has never been the borders of the Seven Kingdoms or the walls of King's Landing. It has always been the wall and everything beyond it. Jon Snow is literally the only character in the story who carries both of those purposes in his blood. He is not just ice and fire as a metaphor. He is the living bridge between the two houses that were always supposed to work together, to guard the boundary between the living world and whatever lives beyond it. Jon Snow's Targaryen heritage may not have landed him on the Iron Throne, but it was significant in fulfilling his prophesied role in saving the living from extinction. And now, after the Night King is dead and the wall has been breached, who needs to be there? Not in King's Landing, not on the Iron Throne, out there, beyond the wall, with the people who actually know that land, building something new in a place where the old rules no longer apply. With the White Walkers gone and no more crows guarding the wall, the icy reaches of the north are now a safer place for the free folk to live. It is possible that Jon could establish some sort of new kingdom there as the new king beyond the wall. Think about what that means. For thousands of years, the free folk and the people south of the wall were enemies. The Night's Watch existed to keep them separated and keep the North safe. Jon Snow, through sheer force of character and moral clarity, turned those enemies into allies. He built trust between groups that had hated each other for generations, and now he goes to live among them. Not as a king, not as a lord, as one of them. That is not a man who failed. That is a man who finished what he started. The real tragedy that people keep missing is not Jon's ending. It is what happened in the middle. The show rushed through the defeat of the Night King in a way that undercut how important that moment should have been. It took approximately 3 episodes and only one major battle to defeat the army of the dead, snuffing out Jon Snow's major story arc as suddenly as Arya jumped out of nowhere to kill the Night King. Jon did not get to be the one to land that final blow, and given everything we know about the prophecy now, that feels like the real mistake the show made, not the ending, but the battle. With the added context of Aegon's dream, it should have been Jon Snow who killed the Night King. Aegon's prophecy foresaw one of his descendants being the king or queen to put an end to the White Walker threat. In the books, this story is still unfolding. George R.R. Martin has not finished the series, but the hints are all there. Jon's resurrection after his murder at Castle Black, the prophecy of Azor Ahai, the ancient warrior reborn to fight the darkness, who according to legend had to make an enormous personal sacrifice. In the original myth, Azor Ahai had to drive a sword through the heart of the person he loved most to forge the perfect weapon. Jon killed the person he loved most to save countless innocent lives. Whether that is a direct parallel or a thematic echo, it fits. And in the books, the wall and what lies beyond it carries even more weight. The others, as the White Walkers are called in the source material, are not just monsters. They are ancient, intelligent, and connected to the magic of the North in ways the show only scratched the surface of. The Night King was given a backstory and a motivation in the show, but in the books the mystery runs much deeper. Jon's role as Lord Commander of the Night's Watch is also more developed in the books, with more political manoeuvring, more tension with the wildlings, and more weight given to the idea that he understands the real stakes when almost no one else does. The point is, whether you're reading the books or watching the show, the pattern is the same. Jon Snow is the character whose entire existence was designed to serve one function: stand between the living world and what wants to destroy it, and when that job is done in the south, he walks toward where the next version of that duty lives. There is one more thing worth saying, and it is about the Iron Throne itself. When Drogon melted the Iron Throne after Daenerys died, a lot of people read that as the dragon acting out of grief. But there is another way to read it. The Iron Throne was forged from the swords of Aegon the Conqueror's enemies. It was always an instrument of war, and its entire purpose, according to the secret Aegon carried, was to hold the continent together long enough to face the real war. That war is over. The threat from the north is gone. The throne has served its purpose and the dragon burned it to the ground. The political system that follows, with Bran as king chosen by the lords, is messy and imperfect. But the point is that Westeros no longer needs a Targaryen on the throne to fulfill a prophecy. The prophecy is done. Jon Snow completed it. So the last thing left for him to do is go home. And for Jon Snow, home was never King's Landing. It was never even Winterfell. From his very first scene in the show, when he chose to join the Night's Watch and head north while his brothers stayed behind, he was always heading in one direction. The wall pulled him. The north pulled him. The cold pulled him. Because that is where he belongs. That is where the people who needed him most were. That is where his purpose lived. He did not lose the throne. He was never supposed to have it. He did not fail the prophecy. He fulfilled it, and then walked away before anyone could corrupt him with the reward. Jon Snow's exile is not a tragedy. It is the ending of a man who always chose duty over comfort, people over power, and the honest life over the easy one. House of the Dragon did not just add context to Game of Thrones. It quietly confirmed that the most overlooked ending in the show was actually the most earned one. Now, if this video gave you a completely different way of looking at the whole story, subscribe because there is a lot more where this came from. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Did Jon Snow get the ending he deserved? Or does the fact that Arya killed the Night King still bother you as much as it bothers most of us? Let me know below.